Today let's learn to jump to handstand. Now this could be learning your first jump or it could be refining the one you have. Normally there's 3 different types of jumps. There's the tuck jump, where we keep the legs more or less together and we pass through a tuck position. There's the straddle jump, exactly the same, but as we jump we pass through the straddle up and back down again. And then there's the third one, which is seen as the hardest, which is the pike jump, where when we jump we straighten the legs, come into the handstand position, straight legs on the way down, bend them at the bottom. Now I'm going to go through each of those. Now it doesn't have to be a jump to a freestanding handstand, we can use the wall. So if you're still learning your handstand balance, we can do exactly the same drills, we're just going to use the wall as much as we need to. I am going to add in some balance components into this, so it could be a complete handstand program by itself, but it might be a little bit more fatiguing than your normal handstand balance program because of all the entries and the exits. Now just make sure that you've done a really good warm-up. We need to do lots of wrist prep, we need to do some shoulder opening exercises, we need to do our normal hip mobility, so quad, hip flexor, hamstring work. So you're in the best possible place to go into your clean pathways that pass through the tuck, the straddle or the pike. If our flexibility is not so good, it does mean that we're going to have to go around to get up into the handstand instead of more vertical straight up. So it's going to be less efficient, but the most efficient pathway for you is going to be the one that fits your mobility and current strength and balance. So let's first have a look at your foundation, your base. So we're going to place hands down on the floor. Now this is going to depend on your current level, your current mobility, and everyone's hand position is going to be slightly different. So go with the one you normally use, or if you want to fine tune it, video yourself from the back or from straight on like this. Place your hands down on the floor, put your shoulders roughly on top. If you're newer to it, you're going to have your hands a little bit wider, and then just come up into this position. See how that feels. You should feel that you're not forcing the position. So if I place my hands too close together and then trying to go in the position, see how now I'm trying to force the position because my elbows want to bend, so I'm trying to bring my arms in. And if I don't have the mobility to go into that position, it's going to feel like I'm forcing the position. So it should feel quite a natural, comfortable position to get into and have the shoulders directly on top of the hands like that. So from the side, it's going to look like this. And ideally, we should be in a position here where see how my feet are light, my shoulders are on top of the hands, as opposed to being like this. Well, now I have all the weight back in my feet. That's going to mean that when I jump forwards, it's going to be a sudden change or a sudden transfer that I have to deal with. Ideally, we want to put as much weight in the hands as we can to start with, so it's like our hips and our legs don't really weigh anything when they go up. So once we've got that strong base position with the hands, we need to think about where our focal point is, where we're looking. And for this, I'd highly recommend you use a marker. It doesn't have to literally be a marker, it can just be any object that you can look at. Picking a surface that doesn't have lots of dots or covers. You know, some of these mats have lots of dots or lots of patterns on the floor. I'd try and go for something that's cleaner and have something you can directly look at, so there's only one thing. So I'm going to place that down and my hands are going to be here. So the object is in line with my index fingers. Now you will fine tune this over time, but that's where I'd suggest a beginner or someone who doesn't know where to go starts with and use that as their base to start with. So hands in that position, shoulders directly on top, focal point all locked in, and then up in a comfortable position here. Now this is going to vary depending on your flexibility, but like I said earlier, we don't want to be too far backwards like this. We want to feel that most of our weight is in our hands and shoulders, and we're not too restricted there, and it should feel nice and comfortable. And then we can just test doing a little bunny hop, a little jump. So hands down in that position, shoulders on top, strong focal point, and then I'm just going to bend the knees. Now notice when I bend the knees, the shoulders stay on top of the hands. What I'm not doing is this. I'm not sinking back to my feet. I'm keeping the shoulders on top. I'm going to sink the knees down a little bit and then a little bunny hop, come back down again. Now my goal here is to keep the shoulders directly on top of the hands all the time while I'm doing that bunny hop. What I don't want to do is jump forwards or jump backwards. So check your setup before you go, during the rep, and then after the repetition to check if anything's changed. And notice I haven't said anything about what to do with your legs. We're just going to let the legs do what feels comfortable. Some of you are going to go a bit more straddly, some of you are going to go a bit more tucked, but don't worry about that. All the focus needs to be on the base. And we'll just jump up in the air and get comfortable with that. Now, if your balance isn't quite so good or you're not so confident, for the next steps, you're going to need to go back to wall. Now, we're not going to lay against the wall. We're not going to lean into it. It's just going to be there as a safety if we need it. So hands and shoulders, exactly the same. Focal point, exactly the same as before. And now I'm just going to try and jump up on top of my base to the wall. Now that's the goal, is just to go straight up, and then if you need the wall, you'll slowly go to it. If you don't need the wall, it will be exactly the same. We're just going to jump, go up to a handstand, come back down again. Now if you do get to the wall, we want to add in a little bit of balance into that as well. Now if you manage to get the jump, every time we get up, we want to add a little bit of balance in there. So we're going to get more and more time under tension, or time in the position for the handstand. So that's what I meant about combining the balance work with these jumps or entry work. So if you get to the wall, we jump up, we squeeze everything together, we push tall, push through the fingers, see if you can come off for a few seconds, show control before coming back down. If you don't need the wall, exactly the same, jump up, hold, squeeze everything together, hold with control, and then come back down. So we're not just going up and coming straight back down, we're not just coming up, laying on the wall and falling back down. Now if you can't get up, if you can't make it all the way up to the wall, or you can't get up to the freestyle handstand, we need to work on building from the foundation, that base, upwards. So what we need to do is video from the side and look at what you're doing. Ideally your shoulders would be on top of the hands, you'd have the strong focal point, and then your hip would jump on top, like so. So my hip is jumping on top of the base. The base is here, I put the hip on top, next goal is feet on top of the base. So it should just go up, 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 like a tower being built. Base first, hips, feet up, wall if you need to. So video from the side, see what you're doing. The most common things that people will do is they'll jump backwards, or they'll jump like this. And that's more because they're scared or worried about doing the movement. Or actually another one people do is they do this. So they'll jump through with their shoulders. So that's like trying to get the shoulders underneath the feet. So the feet are jumping up and down here and the shoulders are getting underneath. That's not creating a strong base. We need the hands, the shoulders, the focal point, the hips go on top, the feet go on top of that. And if you really struggle, we've got a couple of ways we can make it easier. We can kick to the wall or kick up to freestanding, come down through the pathway, and then try and jump back up to trace it. Well, another one I really like that seems like it's going in the wrong direction, but we're actually going to make it harder. So you place your hands on something like this, shoulders directly on top, jump up as high as you can, and then you quickly come down here, do the same jump, and you'll fly up in the air because you don't have to give it as much oomph as this. So even though this might feel a bit scary, when you go back to the floor, you're going to have more power and feel more comfortable. So that can really work sometimes at getting people over the line and get that first jump. Because normally you only need the first couple, it builds that confidence and understanding, and then you can get more reps. Okay, then once we have something to work with, whether it's the eccentric, so kicking up and then using the down only, or ideally it's the up jump, we can then start to play with the different variations of the jump. So let's first think about the tuck position. The way I like to do this is actually laying down on our back on the floor, and then I'm going to mimic the jump. So now I'm in the handstand. So imagine you're in a handstand in that position, the wall is the floor. And then I'm going to bring my knees to my chest like a tuck handstand, and then I'm going to bring the feet to the floor here, and then back again. So this is passing through tuck from the floor to the handstand. So it's mimicking that pathway. Now you'll notice here, see how I've got a gap between my knees? That's because my mobility prefers that. Some of you will be the opposite. You'll prefer to have your knees squeezed together, and that's seen as the cleaner tuck version. But you need to go with what works for you, both in the jump and in the floor version. So then we do exactly the same. Create the base, shoulders on top. Ideally have the legs together. I come down, keep the shoulders on top. I jump, I pass through my tuck, enter the handstand, down, pass through the tuck, back to the start position. But if you need to, separate the legs a little bit, but try and make it as clean as possible. Get that balance at the top, either on and off the wall or in the freestand position, and try and make the eccentric as controlled, if not more controlled than the concentric. So you're getting the up, the hold at the top, and the clean down. Lots of good training. Then we can do exactly the same for the straddle. So we're going to mimic that same position. We pass through straddle. Mind you don't kick the wall. Up, see if you can get toes to touch. You can bend the knees here, because if I was doing a press, I'd keep the legs straight, but we can bend the knees because we're mimicking that press position. Pass through straddle, all the way around to your straight position, and back again. Now, some of you won't be able to do that without having your hands down here. You might need to hold on to something instead of just having your hands up. And if your mobility is not so good, you might need to do a bit of a bent knee on the way through. And it just means your hip's going to have to come up higher as well. That's just reality of your current straddle position. And we need to work on that mobility separate to the straddle jumps. You don't want to try and increase mobility while you're actually doing the jump. Just use the range that you already have. You might get a clunky hip as well because the butt can't go backwards into the floor. So if that does get clunky and it hurts, either move the leg around into a different position or just minimize that drill. Don't wind the hip up. But exactly the same as we've done for the tuck. Set up the same. I like with this one having the knees or the feet this far apart, like hip width. And then as I jump, I pass through straddle into the handstand, show control, come back through that way. If we struggle, remember, kick up, pass through straddle on the way down, stop, try and repeat it on the way back up. Use the wall as needed, but get that balance. Then we have the more challenging one for most people, which is the pike jump. Normally I'd recommend that you have a good straddle and a good tuck before you do this one, but have a play anyway. So now it's legs together, just keeping them straight. We bend them here, but then we straighten all the way to handstand and back again. Now this one is going to need a little bit more of a commitment in the hips or the shoulders to go forwards, just because the legs go round the back and you need to counterbalance in some way. It's not as counterbalancey, if that's a word, as the press, because you're moving with momentum, so you can get away with being slightly out of position, but you will notice those lever arms a little bit more. So exactly the same, shoulders on top of hands, strong focal point, bend the knees. Now at this point, straighten the legs, and then ideally catch the handstand there, show control, come back down with straight, bend as you land. If you need to, use the wall, but come back off, show your balance before coming back down with control. So to make that into a full session, you could just add in balance at the top, so trying to achieve a certain amount of time. So every time you jump up, you could say, okay, I need to get 10 seconds in a handstand. That could be on and off the wall. It could be completely freestanding, or it could be in one of the positions. You could try and hold the 7 or pike position, which would be the hardest. You could hold the tuck, or you could hold the straddle. But if you're newer to it, I would stick with the straight freestanding handstand, or pulling from the wall in that straight position, and then just focus on your jump entries. Don't get too frustrated with this one. If you need to, use the kick-ups, practice the eccentric through the jumps. If you do have any questions, stick them down below. If you'd like more help with your training, check out my website, www.paultwyman.com.au. I offer online coaching and have my app. Thumbs up and subscribe would be appreciated. It really does help the channel out, and I'll speak to you in the next one.